There is DNA for addiction. This is what they've determined is the marker in 99% of addicts, right? That they have this consistent pattern of oversensitivity to light and sound, attunement to environment.
The go-to then is to numb out with alcohol or drugs. A friend of mine just last week knew somebody that just died, thought they were getting cocaine and it was fentanyl. They are putting it though in everything, right? Even in vape, everything.
And we got to tell them how you die. I just think knowledge is power.
Oh, Bob, I can already tell this is going to be a fun interview, okay? I mean, I'm pumped for it. Well, welcome to the show, Bob. I'm super excited to have you here.
Well, thanks for having me. I know I'm real unprofessional, but you're doing good with me.
First of all, listen, this is the only reason what makes this like professional is because we're just two strangers, but really like having this formal podcasting, but really listen, it's just two people having a conversation. So
yeah, that's what it is. Well,
That's
I have
right.
the whole theory about podcasts. The reason why they're exploding is because in regular life, nobody talks anymore.
1,000%,
I go to
right?
pick up on my kids at school. I try to talk to people because I'm 63 and that's what you do is talk to people. And they just look at you like, you're speaking to me and I don't know you. Please stop speaking to me.
1,000%. Or like, what about when you get in what about when you get in the elevator with somebody?
Yeah, no, you
and
can't
like
even.
Nobody's talking. Everybody's like looking down at their phone. I know.
It's crazy. So I think this is a voyeuristic version of the human condition, which is conversation. It's so important. Storytelling, conversation, opinion without decimation of if you have a differing opinion. Just to listen to people talk because people don't talk in real life anymore. And COVID gets a blame. It was going on long before
1,000%. Yeah.
It's social media and the internet and Facebook. That's what it is.
Absolutely. Well, it's funny is that I was just talking to somebody about this the other day, and there was a study that was done. And I can't remember exactly where it was, but it was like basically where this one county, in somewhere like it was like middle America, this one county decided to ban all phones for the kids, and for like elementary, middle school, and high school, and they banned all the phones. You can't even bring your phones. And it was just crazy. It was wild that in the beginning, when everyone was allowed to have their phones, everyone is in the lunchroom, and the lunchroom is like silent almost because everybody's on their phone. They're actually sitting across from their friend, texting their friend.
And so they banned.
We
text. I have 4 kids. We text in the house. It's disgusting.
Seriously. Oh my God. Well, I'll be in the other room and my daughter will text me and that pisses me off. I'll be like, get up and come talk to me.
Yeah. I get it all the time.
Yeah. This study though, they were just saying that like within a matter of weeks, it was like people were actually engaging again. The lunchroom was loud again. People were talking and connecting. So I think you're onto something. You're exactly right. I think that's why people love podcasts. Well, I would just, before we kick off and really sharing, you've got such an incredible story and your mission and what kind of you are on fire in this world for. And I can't wait to share with the listeners all about that. But I'd love to just kick off with some rapid fire questions that really just kind of get the audience to kind of know you a little bit. And so I'm curious, if you had to pick the number one habit in order to regain control of one's life. So, because a lot about this show is women who are feeling stuck. They feel like their life is really out of control. If you had to pick one habit to break that maybe you did or you see a lot of other people do, what would that be and why?
I did it myself. My wife's going through it right now. We have a house full of kids and you're meeting as your kids and they start to go to school. So we talk about being stuck all the time here. So it's interesting. That's a part of your podcast. So great. But, I talk a lot about being stuck. I was stuck in this transitional period between, I was a musician for 20 years. That was my identity. I was no longer going to be that. I hadn't become fully formed as to what I was going to be, and I was stuck. And I got some great advice. Just say yes. Because people would ask me to dinner, and I'd say, oh, no, I can't, I can't. Oh, geez, yeah. You'd be surprised at how we keep ourselves stuck by saying no or avoiding things, right? Somebody asked me, I'm a real talkative person, Gertrude Stein said a line that I love. I do my best listening when I'm talking. That's the story of me. Like I talk all the time. I talk nonstop. And so these guys asked me to go to a silent retreat, a Buddhist silent retreat for 5 days, 5 days and 4 nights, no talking.
Yeah.
And it was kind of a joke that Bob Forrest was going to go to a silent retreat.
Right. Yeah.
But, and then I was like, no, I can't, and I was laughing. We were all laughing. And then my two friends, Dickie and Michael, they wanted me to go and to calm me down, to slow me down, or whatever their theory was that I needed to do. And they were pressuring me. And I said, no, it's not my cup of tea. I'm not a Buddhist or whatever. And it went on for a couple of weeks, and they finally pressured me. And people started, in our circle of friends, started taking bets that if I went, how long I would last. And that pissed me off. And so I said, yes, I'll go. And that was my first yes. And that was a magical experience. And guess who of the three of us was the only person who remained silent for 5 days? Me.
Yeah,
the other two guys. Yeah, and I love the one was I was sharing a room with this guy, Michael, and you walk to the bathroom with mindfulness. You have to like feel your feet on the ground. I don't know if you've ever been to a Buddhist retreat, but it's pretty intense. So I'm walking with mindfulness to the bathroom. I walk back, and I couldn't see when I got back to the room. So I turned the light on. He goes, "What the F word?" And I'm pointing at him like, you talked. So he was out. And then a couple days later, we have a 6 a.m. morning meditation, and my friend Dick wasn't in the room. And so he wasn't there, and we're waiting and waiting. And so I walked back to his room with mindfulness, and I opened the door and I said, like, come on, we got to go meditate. And
Sure.
He's like, shut the door. And I went, so they were both out. But by saying yes, I learned things. I met people. I challenged myself to do things that I didn't think I could do. Like, if nobody had bet that I couldn't do it, I probably would have talked in the first day. But I'm kind of oppositionally defiant.
Yeah. No, I love that. And I love that advice, because I think that for so many reasons, but number one, I definitely think that it gets you out of your comfort zone, right? Oftentimes we say no to things because it's uncomfortable, whatever that looks like, right? I think there's that. I think also, I know for me a lot, like I kind of hide behind this whole like, I'm a busy single mom, entrepreneur, and I don't have, and so I get a lot of social invitations and I turn them all down because I'm like, oh, I don't have time. And it's not that I don't have time. I just don't feel like putting myself out there. That's really what that is. And then, but once I go, I'm always happy I went, right? It's sort of like,
that's the thing that we never realize.
Yes.
So once you go, you either had an experience a memorable experience. I like you do a lot of things, and I'm involved in a lot of nonprofit stuff, and we have a music school. I and my friends, actually the guy Michael that I was at the Buddhist retreat, we have a music school here in Los Angeles, and there was a fundraiser annually for it, and I was at the fundraiser, and when you're doing it, and you're trying to keep your nonprofit alive in a world of nonprofits, right?
Right.
It's intense. So at the end of the night, my friend's there, and he goes, "So see you on Thursday?" And this was on Sunday. And I was like, "See me where?" And he goes, the thing at my house. And I go, "Oh, I already did my nonprofit thing.
I can't do it. Yeah.
Week." And he goes, "You gotta come." And I was like, "Oh, okay." So then, Tuesday, Wednesday, I'm like, "Oh my God, I got to go to that thing. I got to drive all the way over there." And you know how we do.
Sure.
If you're like anything like me,
sure.
LA is a nightmare. I live in Claremont. They live in Beverly Hills. It's just like going to take an hour and a half in traffic and whatever. So I go to this thing, and there's another guy that was at my event at my table, and he's like 2 tons in 1 week, and we're talking like and this is really, I don't think that it's not lost on me, this elite white privileged life that I live. I understand that. I'm not blind to it, but I'm just telling you this funny anecdote. So he's sitting next to me, and he's got the same thing. We're talking about philanthropic burnout. And like,
sure.
You know what I mean? So this fundraiser was this thing called No Kid Hungry. It was one of the first events for it. It's a great organization now all over the country, raises hundreds of millions of dollars, but it was just starting up. Yeah. And the guy, Billy, that ran it, was speaking, and he said, "How many children in America do you think don't know whether they're going to have a healthy breakfast tomorrow?" And me and my friend Baron were looking at each other like, and he put up one finger like 1 million. And I was like, no. Like I put my thumb, like, it's got to be like 4 million kids. And the guy said 16 million children in America don't know whether they're going to have breakfast tomorrow.
God.
This is a sin. This is a sin. I became so passionate about No Kid Hungry that night, it changed my life forever. 16 million children don't have breakfast in the morning. So me and my friends complaining about going to too many nonprofits, got very involved in it, learned everything about it. The funding, actually, this is the craziest thing about America. The funding is available for those children to have breakfast, but there's all these obstacles of bureaucracy in the way, meaning teachers unions, janitorial unions, school boards, right? And now, if you know, No Kid Hungry is everywhere. I helped attach it to Subway restaurants. It's anytime you can donate your change to No Kid Hungry. Have you ever seen that at a fast food restaurant? That's the organization. It started at my friend's house. And so it's exciting. And if I would have just said, no, I'd not returned the phone calls, I wouldn't have been there, and all that wonderful stuff that enriched me in my life and feels good about when I'm dead, I left the world a better place than I came into it. That's what you're striving for. If you say no, you're not doing that. There's no way you can say you're doing that. You got to say yes and get out there and mix it up. And I get in arguments with people, but I try to be respectful and stick to the subject matter. A lot of my friends say they don't want to be involved with other people anymore because of the viciousness and vitriol that's going on. I have intense debates with people that I'm diametrically opposed with, but I'm respectful and loving, and I understand their side of the argument, right? At least I try to.
For
you know
sure.
what I mean?
And which can be hard sometimes, but I love that takeaway, which is just like, listen, say yes, because not only could it change you never know when it's the yes that could change your life, or it's the yes that could change somebody else's life. So I love that. Say yes. I love that. Well, I'm curious, with your experience in recovery, what's the number one lesson that can apply to really anybody trying to make a big life change in midlife?
Well, this is important, and I've been talking about this for years. I was an addict for 15 years of my life. I was an abandoning father. I was out on the streets. I let a lot of people down. I disappointed people. I took advantage of people. And so the only way I could turn my life around was through forgiveness. If we don't have forgiveness anymore, then all that comes after the transformation of somebody won't happen, because we won't forgive. We're a society that's becoming less and less forgiving. And I think it's a real core issue. I think it permeates everything, our schools, our politics, our everything. Like, everybody makes mistakes. And you should have a pathway to redemption. I'm not saying just say sorry and then the person says okay and then they do it again. I'm not saying that. That's what everyone's fearful of. That's why they won't forgive people, because they think they'll do it again. Is this holding accountable? You really you can't, these intense conversations that you have in the 12-step world, where you have to sit down with the person that you've wronged and admit what you've done. And then that person has their voice to tell you what happened, how you affected them, right? And through that comes forgiveness and moving on, right? Hopefully. It takes time and whatever. In El Salvadoran death, I'm not switching gears. This is about forgiveness. El Salvador had these death squads in the 80s, right? And when they were healing their nation, they made the killers from the army sit across from the mothers and daughters and sons and husbands of the people they had killed and ask their forgiveness. You can watch it on YouTube. It's one of the most powerful things. So forgiveness is a big thing that's missing in our society, right?
Yeah.
Really
no,
is.
I mean, I just want to second that. I love that you brought up forgiveness. I can tell you that, I went through a very traumatic divorce 5 years ago, and I really reinvented myself at the age of 40. I left corporate America. I started my platform. I started my podcast. I mean, it was a whole thing. It was just total midlife, like total restart. And
Awesome.
I think for me, well, thank you. But I think for me, I look back and I get asked a lot, like, how did you how did you do that? How did you move forward? And I think for me, it was kind of the mind that it was a two-pronged thing. It was, number one, I'm a very spiritual person, so I really do believe that we are exactly where we need to be always, and there's always a lesson, even in the deepest, darkest moments and the pain. In fact, your biggest lessons can come out of those. And
Yeah.
so, and for me, that was part of it. But then the other piece was forgiveness. It was not just forgiveness of, towards my ex-husband, but it was also forgiveness to myself, and just really practicing. And I think what a lot of people miss is that, like, forgiveness. And I know I'm sure you know this and experience this too. Like, forgiveness is not a one and done. I mean, I know
Yeah,
for
it's
me,
not.
and it's not. It's a daily practice sometimes. And I think you can get to the point where you're no longer having to focus on it every day. You're just at peace with it. But I think that for a long time, depending on what happened, it can be a daily thing that you have to remind yourself of
I'm going
and
to
work
tell you one
through.
of the strangest directions I've ever gotten. It's a big AA thing. I'm a 12-step, I'm in AA, and I had a real problem with a former partner, and it just never ended. It just would go on and on, it ebb and flow, and it would get mean spirited, and it was affecting our friends, because who could be friends with him, who could be friends with me, and just all kinds of nonsense. And a AA guy suggested that I pray for him.
Mm.
And I was like, I don't know if I'm ready for that. and so a few months went by, and I was like, it was like, because friends of mine would come to me going, you guys need to settle this, because I can't deal with this. Because
Yeah,
he would say bad things about me, and I would say bad things about him to these third parties that just want nothing to do with a couple of
sure.
grown men arguing about something that happened 20 years ago. Right?
Sure.
But we're so caught up in it, we can't see how childish we're acting. Right?
Yeah.
So the guy says, I went to him again. I said, so tell me about this thing. And he goes, you're not trying to pray for him. You're trying to pray for yourself, to relieve you of this whatever, this hold that this situation has on you. So you pray for him to have everything in life, and love, and happiness in his life. Every morning you do that.
Mm.
I was like, yeah, I don't know about this. I don't know that I want that for him. And he goes, doesn't matter if you want it for him. Just do it. So I started doing it. I'll never forget, I lived in an apartment in Koreatown. I would get up in the morning, and whether it was right in the morning or when I was in the shower, and I would pray for this person to have everything that they want, have abundance and love and light. And I did it for about a month, and I saw him, and I felt differently. And he
Wow.
started his side of it. And I was like, dude, I loved you. I don't know why we're in this position, rather than go back at him. And that was unlike me. And this thing of just reminding yourself, you don't want this division, this hatred, you don't want it in your life,
Right.
right? Because, and don't worry about that person's life. Just hope for the best for them. Hope for them to have love and light. And it really worked. And now we're pretty good friends. I mean, we're not best friends.
Right.
That's the other thing. I can deal with him, he can deal with me, and it's not affecting anybody else, right? We actually
Yeah.
went to a Dodge game together this year, so things
I,
are improving, and we have to make efforts. It gets back to that. Yes, you have to be open, the openness to try something that's outside your comfort zone, like you said,
yeah.
right? I deal with a lot of divorce, and I've been divorced twice myself, actually. And addiction has a lot of divorce and so much anger and frustration, and you know they always say, like, financial problems are the number one reason for marriages to end in divorce. What do you think drugs cause? so,
Right. Right.
so,
Right.
so every addict marriage has financial problems and the emotional problems of
Yeah.
drugs and everything that goes on. So I've been around it a lot, and and I always say to the person, usually I'm counseling the male, but sometimes the female, and I'll always say, try to remember them the way you fell in love with them.
Mm.
Because you're forgetting that person, and you're forgetting why you're in this marriage, and you're forgetting why you have a family. Try to remember them the way they were,
Mm.
because addiction changes you, and what we're hoping for is that the person in your life can get sober and maybe not be that person that they were, a new version of it, but some of the good qualities that you remember are going to come back. And
Yeah.
this fighting and blaming and arguing is not going to really solve it. And I've done that. I've fought and blamed and argued myself. I know what it feels like.
Yeah. Well,
Right.
you know, it's interesting that you kind of the way that you work with people is to almost like have them separate, right? The addict from
Oh,
the
you have
actual
to.
person.
You
Well,
have
I can
to.
tell, yeah, for sure. I can tell you though, it's really interesting. And it didn't really click until you said this because I was thinking through, you know, I have a very good co-parenting situation, very good relationship with my ex-husband. And I think a lot of what that comes from is because I got to the point where I was able to separate the husband and the person that I knew before. And I was able to say, he is this the husband thing ain't working for me anymore. Like this situation is about, but I knew you before you were my husband,
There you
and I
go.
remember who you are, and we were friends before then. And although I just can't be your wife anymore, but we can co-parent, we can be friends, we can do this. And I was able to separate the two, and that for me was very powerful and really helped me to mend that relationship pretty quickly.
You're not going to believe this, but so, and I got this advice from a sober guy, a friend. I had a very, not that contentious at mediation. It got a little nasty. Like, you know what I mean? And,
Yeah.
like it can, because everyone's panicked and everybody feels they're going to get ripped off. Like so much of marriage is a business arrangement, and that is, it should be separate, and
Yeah.
then the marriage thing. But anyway, so, but it was never great, right? Until the person remarried and divorced again.
Hmm.
And then I think they started to see, like, hey, maybe the problem has got a little to do with
Sure.
me.
Sure.
Right? She lives across the street from us. Our son goes back and forth from both houses.
I love
So,
that.
and that took 10, 12 years, you know,
Sure.
12 years. But you have to allow the other person to go on their journey too. And when you're just fighting, we just stay stuck. We just stay
Yes.
stuck in this thing. But
Yeah.
my son is thriving. He's 13, and
Love
he
it.
was not through all that trials and
Right.
tribulations. You know, he
Yeah.
was a C student. He's an A student now.
Love that.
You know, just little things like that. He has a passion. He goes to a great charter school now. When parents get on a co-parent and get on the same page and be respectful, great things happen for the kids. I've watched it.
1,000,000,000,000,000,000%. Yes. And I know that's easier said than done. And listen, I think you can attest this and I can attest it too. Was it always easy? Absolutely not. Are there
No.
times when you want to tell that ex to go off and all the things?
Yeah.
Yes. Like none of it. It's not easy. But I think, you know, what I realized was that I loved my kids more than I loved my kids more. And it was more important for me to have a good relation or for them to have a good relationship with their dad, for everything to be cohesive than to let my feelings of the situation get in the way. And I know for
Exactly.
me that's what that looked like for me.
And it took a while, right?
Yeah,
And
it
you
does.
know, little things happen though. Let's just talk about that. Little things happen that just drive you nuts. So there, he was a gamer. Now he's a musician. But when he was a gamer, when he was like 6, 7, 8, um, he sent me an attachment of him on Twitch or something gaming. I don't know.
Yeah.
And it said father son gaming together, and it was his stepdad. And it said father son, and I was like, you need to take that
Oh.
shit down.
Yeah, that's triggering, right? Yeah.
That was, you know what I mean? And I was
Yes.
so hurt by it, and then you know I get lashing out when I get hurt, like most people, and I don't think it was meant, you know, to harm me, you
Yeah.
know, but when you see something like that, it just profoundly affects you. And then that led to a lot of conversations about who's what and what's who.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
my wife is an educator, so she's pretty specific. I'm not your mom, I'm Chrissy. You're
Yeah.
not, you know, we got to be specific about things. We don't have any rules to this. If 2/3 of marriages end in divorce, we need some rules about how the parents are going
Yes.
to be co-parented,
Yes.
right?
I totally agree.
You know, and that's been a hard thing. It's just like kids have lots of people in their lives, and it confuses them when they say they have two mommies, mommy number one, mommy number two. I don't know how you do it, but it's my wife is we don't even say stepmom. It's
Yeah.
Chrissy. It's
Yeah.
Chrissy.
Yeah,
right?
my ex is not remarried, but I would say when I grew up, my dad was my dad, and then my stepdad was Eric. I mean, I that was it. I mean, I had my
There you
stepdad was
go. So
Eric, and
so they
yeah,
were doing things right
yeah,
then,
yeah,
and now we're
yeah.
all screwed up.
Exactly.
I have friends that are mommy number one, not mommy number two. If
No,
I gave birth to a child, I don't want to be called mommy number one.
well,
I'm your
seriously,
mom.
yeah, exactly. I do think whatever works for families is great, but for me, like, yeah, like don't give me mommy number one. I am mom. Thank you.
Yeah.
So I am so curious, like well, first of all, I mean, honestly, your journey from addiction to recovery, it's super inspiring. And I would just love to know, like, really what pivotal moment for you did you realize that you needed to make a change in your life? Like, how did that moment unfold for you?
Well, it compounds. It's interesting. I deal with addicts all the time. And I look now what I've learned doing this for 28 years, I can look at my story and it's just so textbook. But when you're living it, you think it's so unique and different
Sure.
and you're trying to explain it. You don't even know your narrative while it's happening, right?
Mm,
But what happened was I was, and I think this happens a lot now because the drugs are so deadly. I was pushed into rehab before I even thought I had a problem,
mm,
right? So then, and it was mostly through a girlfriend who was living vicariously through me, and I was a musician, and I was going to be a rock star, or I was a rock star, and I could be even bigger if I stopped taking drugs. And I was just like, whoa, whoa, whoa. And it was because I think it was because her dad had gotten sober. And
mm.
so then she thought, well, if Bob gets sober, then he's gonna just astral project into fame and money and power, and that will be great for all of us,
Sure,
right?
sure.
And um, and and I just remember, like, they did an intervention on me. I would say honestly, I was alcoholic. Yeah, I would say I was developing alcoholism. Was I an addict? Not what was to come, where I was begging to be in a treatment center and crying at night wanting to get off drugs. I wasn't at that stage. And I think
Mm,
by going into treatment so early, I could easily just dismiss it.
mm.
So I went to Hazelden in 1988, and I just was there, and I was a little sarcastic, and I was like, I get it. This is good for old people. I get it. You know what I mean? And so when I came out, I stayed sober on my own for about 8 months. And so that easy transition, because they're telling you when you leave a treatment center, you're going to use immediately unless you do what we told you to do. And I didn't do
Mm,
anything they told me to do. And I stayed sober for months and months and months. So
mhm.
right away, I'm convincing myself I'm not like that. I don't need that help. Later on, when I did need the help, I had this bad attitude about the whole process. And I think that's what we've done to this generation of addicts, the millennial generation of addicts. I've been dealing with them since 2004. They were rushed into treatment because of the Parity Act and because of Obamacare and access to treatment. And they were in treatment centers, and I was in with them, and there was no reason for them to be there. They weren't motivated. They didn't care. They didn't complete their programs. They didn't fulfill their treatment plans. They had no interest in it. But yet we were keeping them in treatment centers, A, because it's lucrative for the treatment center, B, because the drugs are so deadly.
Mm.
So what you saw from 2004 till now is this skyrocketing death rate because the drugs are so deadly, and
Yeah,
the addict young people are so unrealistic about the world they're living in. And they're not
yeah,
ready. They're not ready. And treatment doesn't work if you're not ready. It
right.
really doesn't. And so I think that's what happened to me. And then I watched it happen to millennials. I would have kids in treatment. I go, what the hell are you doing here? You don't want to be here. You don't take anything seriously. You don't think you're an addict. Like, what are you doing here? And what you'll realize is they were living independently from their parents. They're 23, 24, 25, failure to launch, failure to do anything, failure to have a job. They get out of their parents' house and go eat some nice food for a while. It's like why they were in treatment, I swear. All in Florida, your home state, just there's a rehab center on every corner
Oh, sure.
yeah, you know what I mean?
Florida, yes.
None of those
Yeah.
kids, a lot of those kids were not ready for treatment. And so my journey was I wasn't ready for treatment. Then when I desperately needed it, so I take it from when I desperately wanted to stop and I couldn't. that was about a 3-year journey, and that was
Mm,
frightening. I would cry. I would talk to myself. I'd be sober. I'd go to a detox unit. I'd be sober. After about 2 weeks, I'd give in because my life was so cruddy or whatever. I'm baby whining stuff, and I'd be driving to the drug dealer's house, crying, talking to myself, saying, "Don't do this."
mm,
That kind of madness is, you never forget it, you
yeah.
know. And then luckily I ended up getting arrested and getting sober, by happenstance. It was strange. My sister, who had disowned me, kind of came and visited me in jail, and that had that's once again forgiveness. She
Mm,
came, and I know she comes from Whittier. I was in Castaic Lake, if you know Southern California. It's like a 2-hour drive. She went to visit
mm,
me on a Saturday in jail. I hadn't seen her in 3 years,
mm,
and that was so beautiful. And she said, "Bobby, if you stay off drugs after you get out of here, you can stay at my house." And
mm.
I did. And I respected her house, and I disrespected her house many times, and used and stole money from her and all the things that addicts do. Um, and that, being around her, being around my family, which I hadn't been for a decade, and being forgiven but held accountable. You use one time, I smell alcohol in your breath, you're out of here. I'll call the police on you. That's what she had to say.
Sure. Yeah.
And but that, I stayed with her for about 2 months, and it really was beautiful and magical. She just passed away a couple of years ago,
Mm,
but
sorry.
beautiful and magical. So my journey was similar to everyone's, but I thought it was so unique, right? Do you understand? And
Yeah.
I'm seeing it now where, so they do this intervention on me. I will never forget. It was like my best friend who was in a band, and his guy from 12-step rehab world, and my managers and my girlfriend, and I just remember them all saying they wanted me to go, and then they wanted me to go to this one in LA, and I was such an arrogant, like spoiled prince. I said, "What?" And I didn't know they had them here. This is in 1988, before there was rehabs everywhere.
Yeah.
I said, "If I am going to go, which I'm saying probably, I'll go. I want to go that one that Elizabeth Taylor went to. I think it's in Minnesota." I did. I heard that. I read in National Enquirer that Elizabeth
Oh
Taylor
my
went to a rehab in
God.
Minnesota, and so that's where I went. It's called Hazelden.
Oh my, you did it. You did go
I
there.
did
Well,
it.
well, I mean, and it worked though, right?
Yeah,
So, I
I
mean,
met some magical people there. I met the junkie nun. Her name is. I don't know if she's still alive, but maybe she is. She was a nun. The people don't know this. Nuns get a couple weeks off every 6 months.
oh my
They
gosh.
do.
She was a
They do.
drug addict nun.
Yes. She'd go off on
Interesting.
wild events.
Do
Wild.
you think that there's nuns that they're on their 2 weeks, they just go out and just have wild sex for like
Yeah,
two
she
weeks? I
was
mean,
doing that
right?
too. She was doing that too. Oh
I
yeah. Oh yeah.
mean, I would assume so. That's the kind of nun I would be.
Yeah. Yeah.
I would never make it as a nun. That's a damn sure.
But did
Oh
you ever
my,
know that they got a couple 10 days off?
no.
Like,
Well, they
yeah,
probably shouldn't give them
I
any
want
time
to do a
off.
documentary. Me and Anthony Kiedis, the Chili Pepper singer, have a production company. I want to do a documentary about what nuns do on that 10-day off.
Seriously, I want to know. Well, this is why they shouldn't give them time off anymore. Then, okay? Yes.
So, anyways, I
Uh,
met people, and I, just it was the beginning of respecting sobriety. Was Hazelden. But it
yeah,
wasn't for
I love
me.
it.
It was for old people. And here's an interesting thing. 1988, I was 27 years old. I was the youngest person in Hazelden Rehab. Fast forward now, you go to my rehab. I have a rehab in Malibu. 27 would be one of the older people in rehab.
That's wild.
It's crazy, right?
Well, it is. And so I'm curious, like, and this is because I know you talk a lot about about opioids and the
Yeah.
epidemic in the US. And there was a stat that your team had sent me, and I was just blown away by it. I want to talk about it a little bit, which is
Sure.
Americans, which are 4% of the global population,
4.7%.
yeah,
4.7 of the
consume
world population. 80%
80%
of the
of the
opioids.
opioids.
Is
Why?
everyone
Why do you?
listening right now? How come you don't hear that on CNN and CBS? And because pharma owns the airwaves. We are 4.57% of the population, about 5% of the world's population, we consume 80% of the world's opioids.
Why
I
is
have
that?
clients that initially they were prescribed Vicodin for PMS. Like
What?
what? Like,
Why? It's
my mom
wild.
used to have bad periods, but she didn't
Sure,
take
but not
heroin for it.
Seriously. Well, it's really interesting. I read a book, and this is a fiction book, but it was based off of the infiltration of the pharmaceuticals in like in Appalachia,
Oh
that
yeah,
whole area.
that's saturated.
It
Yeah.
was, I don't know if you ever read the book Demon
Oh
Copperfield.
no,
Did you read it?
there's a non-fiction book about it too. I forget the guy's
Well, this
name,
book,
but
this is a nonfiction, and it won the Pulitzer actually 2 years ago. It's a fantastic book. Oh my god, you should pick it up. Demon Copperhead, not Demon Copperfield. Demon
okay.
Copperhead. Anyways, no, but I never realized though, and I mean, this is really just big pharma at its at its worst, is just their whole plan of like infiltrating these extremely poor, uneducated, and popping up all these like basically doc in a box clinics, and we're getting like these entire communities on opioids.
The
And
entire it decimates all of Kentucky, all of West Virginia.
yes,
I have an organization called Don't Die, and I went to Huntington, West Virginia. One of their main problems in Huntington, West Virginia, is the grandparents are raising their children's children because both parents are dead of drugs. We're creating orphans. Purdue Pharmaceutical created orphans in West Virginia.
yeah,
Like,
it's
and that's
wild.
true, and it's just crazy. But we are also are a society willing to put anything in our mouth that a doctor gives us, and we
Yeah,
got to
that's
stop
true.
that. We've got to
Yeah,
stop. So
yeah.
Dr. Drew is a partner of mine. He always says,
Hmm.
everybody thinks doctors got all these options. The doctor can cut you open, talk to you, or write you a prescription. That's all they can do.
Yeah,
You
no,
know what I
it's
mean?
true. Yeah.
And so prescriptions have become the go-to move because they don't really have time to talk. You don't want to hurt people's feelings about saying how unhealthy you are and that you got to do better or try some other things. So and the reason why doctors don't talk honestly to patients, I think a lot of the health and fitness people get very angry about the obesity rate in America. The reason why doctors don't tell people they're unhealthy and they need to start exercising and eating differently and eating better is because the whole pay system is based on like a Yelp review. So if you tell somebody who's unhealthy, hey, you can't be eating the way you're eating. You've got to start exercising. This is really a critical, you're in a critical health situation right now. Doctors don't say that because then they'll get a bad review. They'll get 2 stars instead of 5. So all they do is write them a cholesterol prescription and a heart disease prescription, diabetes, insulin, and they say nothing about what's causing those problems because they won't get their pay raise at the end of the year. I swear to God, we have made this whole society based on Yelp.
It's
My rehab, people go to rehab based on a Yelp review or
Which is
Yelp stars. It's
It's
insane.
crazy.
You know
Yes,
what I
it
mean?
isn't crazy. Yes, for sure. Well, I know, and that opioid, I mean, that just blew me away. But I know, like, so I mean, this is what's so fascinating about the work that you're doing is you are very adamant about being a part of the solution, though, for
Right.
that, and that's exactly what I think with this DNA for addiction test that you you talk about. So tell us about that. What?
Well,
Yeah.
it's been since Hazelden. So they told me I had a disease of addiction, right? And they told me that it was genetically based and that it was triggered by childhood trauma, which I knew I checked that box, and that it was, and the third ingredient was use in the face of adverse consequences, right? So I said, okay, I want to take the test. And they're like, what? Because I'm an arrogant rock star guy. I'm like, I want the genetic test just to make sure that I got this thing.
That you have that gene.
Yes, I swear I wanted the test. And they're like, this is an example of why you're not surrendered and why you're in denial. And I said, all I'm
Sure.
asking for is the test that you're saying of this disease that I have. And they said, well, there is no test for it. I was like, what? How can you say it's genetically based if there's no test? They go by family history, which is true.
Okay.
My
Sure.
My grandfather, my great grandfather died of alcoholism. My mom was an alcoholic. My sister mom was an alcoholic drug addict. So my family was littered with alcoholics and drug addicts. So you could say, well, there's a positive check. And I said, but you don't have a test? And they said, no, they don't have a test for it. Now there is DNA for addiction. So I've been telling this story for years. Like, we tell people they have a genetically based disease and we don't have a test for it. We did, but it was so expensive, nobody could take it, right?
Yeah.
UCLA had it probably 20 years ago. They're the ones that discovered this consistent pattern in the genome. And interestingly, it has nothing to do with alcohol or drugs or anything. It's in the curve of the genetics that has attunement, sensitivity to light and sound, environment, right? That's where the markers are consistently in alcoholics and drug addicts. And so you wonder, like, what's that got to do with it? And I started thinking, like, well, a lot of, if you're extra sensitive to light and sound, which I am, once I realized and knew it, I always have dull lighting and I never have white light bulbs. I never have since I was a kid. Like, it's just so bright. And, I can hear noises and sounds like that other people doesn't bother them. I'll be like, what is that and it's like some car alarm from like an apartment building down the street. I'm like, somebody needs to turn that off. And my wife is like, I don't even hear it. I was like, you don't hear that?
Yeah.
Right?
No, I'm laughing because I'm like, I have the same thing. So go ahead. Yeah, I'm the same way.
So this is what they've determined is the marker in 99% of addicts, right? That they have this consistent pattern of oversensitivity to light and sound, attunement to environment. Attunement to environment nowadays means, you ever catch other people's feelings? Like, I can walk into a room and I can tell somebody's sad. I can tell something bad.
So
has
you're
happened.
a little bit of an empath. Yeah, for sure.
Empathetic.
Yeah.
So if you think about it, this is not the greatest world to be overly sensitive to light and sound and empathetic to other people. You know what I mean? It's a little overwhelming.
But it makes sense. Why kind of the go-to then is to numb out with alcohol or drugs. 100%.
So where do we get exposed to drugs? In adolescence. So compound your overly sensitive environment and you're in puberty.
Yeah.
You need something right then. And usually it's a beer, pot, and you'll see, I've heard thousands and thousands of addicts describe the first drug or alcohol experience as they felt so at ease. It made them feel like how they thought other people felt. That's not a normal reaction. That's only 10 to 20% of the population has that reaction. Right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I had that reaction. I mean, for sure. Same thing. It was like for me, and I've always described alcohol as for me because I've had a history of abusing drugs and alcohol too, where it just kind of silences everything out.
Calms everything down.
It just kind of like all the noise and everything going on and all the thoughts and all the everything just shuts. It just shuts down.
You don't need the test.
I don't need the test. I know. I don't need the test.
So here's the thing. The great thing about the test. So Sarah, my friend, I told her and Paul, these are my partners, and like, I was like, there's got to be a way in this day and age with all the DNA testing and all the testing for cancers and breast cancers. There's got to be a way somebody could come up with a DNA test for addiction. Just simple thing to market and say, hey, you've got this. It doesn't mean you're a drug addict. It doesn't mean anything. It just means you have that genetic marker that if you have childhood trauma and if you continue to use drugs and alcohol in an abnormal way in the face of adverse consequences, you're going to be in trouble, right? And so my idea was, who would want this test most of all? Parents.
Yeah, so let's talk about that. Yeah.
When you're an addict, every addict I know that has kids always says, yeah, that one for sure is an addict. I have a daughter that for sure is not. She doesn't have the same neurotic reactions to the world that my older sons do and my little guy does. So I think out of 4 kids, I got 3 alcoholics and 1 normal person.
I mean, listen, I'm the same way. I can look at my son and I'm like, oh God, okay, well, he needs to take this test. And then then what do we do with it? Because I'm like, I can already tell he is so like me. I'm like, this is scary. So yes, I get it. So
and
yeah,
he
so
eats. So I test the kids, and then along the way, we can use it as a tool. It's just a talking point. It's just a tool. It's just an entry point to talk to your kids about drugs, right? And it certainly makes you as a parent aware when you go to the dentist and they're prescribing, for, doing some routine dental work, they're prescribing opioids to your 11-year-old daughter. Say, no, thank you. We're fine. Can you just have ibuprofen 800, please? We don't need any opioids. If you know that your child is predisposed or has these markers, the exposure is the key thing. And in America, like we say, 80% of the opioids consumed in the world are consumed in America. You can stop it. You can say, no, I don't need it. No, I don't. My kid doesn't need. Here's the thing about opioids, which most people don't understand. They don't heal the pain. They don't heal the broken leg.
Right.
They don't heal the tooth.
Right.
They just block you from feeling that pain. That pain's going to subside. It's going to get less and less, and it's going to go back to normal within 3 to 5 days or 2 or 3 weeks. And the ibuprofen or anti-inflammatories are really just as good for these minor things that we take opioids for. Yeah. And understand, there's great use for opioids. If you got terminal cancer, I've pushed the button on a lot of my friends. Like my friend Maureen had terminal mouth cancer, and I went to visit her, and she said, "Want to push the button? The morphine button." Yeah, I pushed it like 4 times. She goes, "It only does 1 dose."
my dad and I, because we're cut from the same cloth, and we would always joke, be like, okay, if ever you're in the hospital and you got the pain point, just always tell them your pain's a level 10, because you tell them anything less than that's just confessions of an addict, right? Always tell them that your pain is a level 10, because if not,
unless they read you as a junkie, because I'm read as a junkie. I got sober before the pain scale, but I always would, I would like a 7 or 8. So Dr. Drew used to say this thing like, 1 being, I forget what he said for 1 on the scale, 7 being amputated limb, 10 being, a childbirth. You know what I mean? and the junkies in our hospital would always say, I don't know, like an 8? Somewhere between amputated limb and childbirth. And the guy's sitting there calm as a cucumber.
I don't know, like an 8? That's right, exactly. Well, so I'm curious though, because I think that there's something so powerful about, I want to talk about this for a minute though, like just about having this knowledge for your kids. So first of all, I just want to know, how does the test work? Is it just saliva?
Yeah, it's just mouth, and you send it in.
So it's saliva. My second question though then is, how do you share this information with a child who, without making them feel like something's wrong with them?
Yeah. So that I deal with that all the time. So one is when they're 6, 7, 8, you don't even talk about it. You're just protecting them against big pharma.
That's knowledge for you.
Just knowledge for you.
Yeah.
But as it goes on, we do this thing with tweeners now, a little bit older, where we're doing the same thing that doesn't work, which is just say no, scared straight, all this kind of, you're going to end up like a hobo. My dad, all these things that parents have been doing for 100 years. My dad used to call homeless people hobos. They used to be called hobos.
Same,
he
mine
said,
too.
You end up on drugs like your sister, you're going to be a hobo like him. You know what I mean? That's the same thing that we're doing with just say no. We're not giving children the tools to say no. We're just saying, you say no, no, and scared straight and all these kind of scare tactics. Is police coming in saying you're gonna die or get in a car accident. They don't work, obviously.
No.
We have the highest exposure rate for recreational drugs in the world. So obviously what we've been doing doesn't work with young people.
Sure. Yeah.
So I'm trying a new take, which is educate and respect, right?
Yeah.
So one of the statistics that really is fascinating to me, if your exposure rate of drugs is 13 or younger, you have an 80%, 72% chance of needing assistance, whether it be outpatient psychiatry or rehab, in adult life.
Wow.
That is a fascinating statistic. Now, if you can hold off till 15, that number drops to 50%. So I've told
Wow.
my older kids, like, if you can just hold on to smoking weed till you're 15,
Just 15.
just hold on. Just hold on. There's no reason to rush this. No, but to talk
That's
realistically
true,
about
though. But
drugs.
that's a really good, and I think, that's powerful. That's super powerful. And I think you're right. I mean, it's not about, because we all know that the dare to keep your kids off drugs, just say no, the abstinence thing, none of that works. None of that works. I think
You
it's
know
about
what
having,
does work, though?
yeah,
Growing up around it.
yeah.
Growing up and seeing it. You know, I work a lot with inner city kids. There's not a lot of drug use. There's more drug use in Claremont, California, which is known for the Claremont colleges, and more where our city motto is PhDs and oak trees.
Oh
You
my
know what I
God.
mean?
Yeah, yeah.
How arrogantly white is that?
Oh
And
my God.
and Watts, the exposure rate is less in Watts than in Claremont for young people.
Right. Yeah.
Because in Watts, you see what it did to your cousin, your brother, or you see what it does to your street, or you see what it does to your community. You see, you can't but help see if you're walking to school, middle school in Watts, California.
Sure. Sure.
So
No,
you're
that makes
well
sense.
aware of the negative consequences of drugs. In Claremont, it's so sanitized, nobody even talks about it. And we're having a really big crisis here. We had 2 8th graders arrested for dealing OxyContin at middle school.
God.
We had 3
God.
deaths at Claremont High School in over a 12-month period of time. I went and talked to the mayor, who talked to the principal of the high school and he said, we have a zero tolerance campus. I don't know what Mr. Forrest is talking about. I was like, the girl told her parents, the boyfriend of the girl who died told her parents she went to school to score drugs. Just trying to give you a heads up, principal. They go to school to score drugs in your school. Wake the F up.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they hide behind that veil of like, well, we have a zero tolerance campus. Like,
yeah. Well, get your head out of the sand. Yeah, exactly.
yeah.
Well, one of the things that, because I know, as we start, I mean, honestly, there's so much more I want to talk to you about, but that we cannot end the episode without talking about this first, though, as we round up, because this right here scares the hell out of me. I was just having a conversation, and this is the topic of fentanyl and how this is infiltrating the entire drug
It's
scene.
in every.
It
it's
is
in
so
every.
damn scary to me. I just was having a conversation with a friend of mine, and listen, I make no secret about it. When I was in my 20s, I mean, I did more blow than I can even account for. And what's so scary to me, I just a friend of mine just last week knew somebody that just died, thought they were getting cocaine, and it was fentanyl.
I know, it's crazy.
But now, though, you're hearing stories, and I think about parents and their children, like they are putting it, though, in everything, right? Even in vape, everything, like,
I
yeah.
have the best advice for kids.
Yes.
So the deaths that you're hearing about are orally taken pills, right?
Okay.
Often with young people. So what happens is they're taking a Xanax. If you look at the story of Mac Miller, the great musician and producer, he thought he was taking a Xanax. He was taking a fentanyl-laced Xanax. And when you ingest the whole thing by taking it what young people think is safely, you're not smoking it, you're not inhaling it, you're not injecting it, you're taking it safely, which is putting the whole thing in your mouth. You can't stop the fentanyl load. So the person goes unconscious and the fentanyl keeps coming and they stop breathing. Intravenous use is the other way that happens. So people die from shooting drugs and orally taking drugs. Rarely die from smoking them, because you would take one hit and pass out, but you wouldn't have all the other hits behind it. I know this sounds crazy.
But what about snorting it, though? Because I know a lot of people.
Snorting the whole thing. That if you're going to snort the whole thing, most times people do little by little. I'm not advocating anything. I'm just telling you why people die from these first exposures. It's because they take the whole load of fentanyl, right?
Yeah.
If the guy got some cocaine and snorted a huge line like he always does, he's got all that fentanyl in his system, and it's just crazy that we're at this place. So what I try to do is tell kids, let's have some rules. Nothing goes in your mouth. No pills in your mouth, because we had a raft rash of drug overdose where kids, it was the first or second time they're at a party where they put a bowl of pills and everybody takes a pill.
God.
Kids were dying like crazy from that
Holy shit. So
because
scary.
you know what I mean, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I try to say, and when you start talking about drugs this way with 11, 12, 13, 14, 15-year-old kids, they immediately get a little scared and anxious because they know that they don't know that much about it. And you're talking as an informed parent. Like,
Sure.
you don't take pills,
Yeah.
you know, just don't, you know, because what are the alternatives? Marijuana, which, by the way, at my son's middle school, a girl died vaping what she thought was marijuana. It was fentanyl in the vape pen.
Well, so that's what I'm saying, though. I know you're telling
It's
your
in
the advice is
everything.
well, right. So then, so what do we do about that? So I know it's like
We
don't
got
take
to
the
tell
pills
them
and
it's
don't.
in everything,
It's
and we
in
got to tell them
everything.
how you die. I just think knowledge is power. You know, my 13-year-old knows pretty much everything, and he's 13. Like,
Yeah.
and he's now having this problem where he sees people drifting off and taking drugs more and more, and he's not friends with them. And I said, well, I mean, you need to have that conversation with them.
Yeah.
You need to
Yeah.
be courageous, stand upright, and be strong, like Bob Dylan says. You
That's
can't
right.
just shy away from somebody. They don't know why you're not hanging out with them. You've
Yeah.
got to be of strong, sound character and say, "Hey, man, I'm worried about you. I don't like hanging around with you. I don't like when you're like that. I don't like what's going on. I wish, you know, I wish you wouldn't do that so we could hang out." That's what we need. We need kids talking to other kids. But like I said in the beginning of the podcast, nobody talks to anybody about anything. They just listen to podcasts.
Yeah, that's right.
And my son is probably going to listen to this and go, "Why are you talking about me so much?"
No, but I love that. And I think, and you're right. I just think that, yes, I mean, definitely I think some ground rules, like you said, like no shooting stuff, no shooting stuff with a needle, no pills. And listen, what you have to know is, yes, the mayor would like, so I think the takeaways, if I'm hearing you right, is like, okay,
Realistic.
yeah,
However you see it, just realistic, honest
yeah,
dialogue with your children. And I
yeah,
think the DNA for addiction test begins that, right?
yeah,
Like, look at, like, here's the thing. We have what we call it is low, moderate exposure possibility, right? So if you're no exposure possibility, like, I wouldn't bring it up with you
yeah,
because
yeah.
there's still a chance. You know how many kids I've probably been to their memorials who I don't think were addicts? Hundreds.
God,
There was
that's
a
so scary.
college here. There was a place called Sober College where kids were going out of rehab into the sober college. They closed it because it was so heartbreaking how many kids died.
God, yeah,
I mean, but now luckily it's starting to crest. I think 2024 is going to be the year that it starts to subside because of education, because of people talking about it, because of people being aware of it. I think in 2005, 2010, 2015, parents had their heads buried in the sand.
yeah.
Right? They thought, I talked to so many moms who said he was the quarterback on the football team. I was like, and my older son had told me, like, even the cheerleaders and quarterbacks and valedictorians are getting high. And I was
Are
like,
you
oh
kidding?
my.
Yes, and listen, we used to leave school. I was captain of the cheerleader squad. We would leave school before a football game on a Friday, go and get high, and then go to the football game and cheer the whole game. Yeah, everybody's doing
Yeah,
it. Like this is not.
Well,
Yes,
I think the generation of parents had thought like just the kids like me, you know, like the
no, right,
musicians. We had a thing at my high school. I graduated in '79. It was a bridge that went over a river to the main street, and it was called Stoner Bridge. And I was a Stoner Bridge regular, right? So the
right.
reason why you would smoke weed out there is because if the security guard came from the school or police came from the street, you just dropped the weed in the river.
And that,
And so I think most
yeah,
parents think all those, you know, the people from Stoner Bridge or the people that wear puka shells or the goth kids, they're the ones that take drugs. And my son,
right.
who's 38 now, said, "No, Dad,
No, yeah,
everybody takes drugs."
yeah.
And
That's
we need
true.
to know that. And just talk to your kids wherever, meet whoever where they are with what you're comfortable with. I always say with kids, with parents giving their kids the bottom line, like, careful what you threaten, right?
Sure.
Are you willing to follow through on it, right?
Yeah.
My
Yeah.
kids know I'm willing to follow through on it. I adopted this thing. My older son lived with me and I felt guilty and blah, blah. And I've been sober for all my other three kids. And I always tell him, like what my dad said, this is my house. You live here because you're my kid.
Sure.
You're supposed to take advantage of this opportunity to become someone who has a house like this.
Yeah. I love that.
You're not living here ongoing like a lot of people do.
Right.
You know what I mean? But I
Yeah.
think that there's another thing that's going on, and this is to moms. I have a lot of mom friends that at a certain point, because let's face it, there's not a lot of dads sacrificing their lives and their dreams to raise children. There are some, I'm a liberal, but there are some, but mostly it's moms. They're giving up a little bit of what they thought their lives were going to be like to take care of children.
Mm-hmm.
And you got it. And this is interesting that you have this podcast about it. At a certain point, the children don't need you so much anymore. And you need to get back to your dreams.
Yeah.
You need to get back to the things that you put aside to raise these kids. Because when you don't, you never want them to leave. I think that's what's happening with millennials. I got 34-year-old clients that live with their parents. Why? That just seems like torture to me as a parent.
Same.
Same. Right? But if you never got back to you, of course you want them to stay.
Yeah.
Get back to you. I told my mother-in-law, she's 72 years old, like, you should go back to work. And she's like, what? I go, you're just too meddling in our lives.
You need to move.
And she's like, she's worked her whole life, right? And she just retired like about 5 years ago. It's like, sorry, you should think about going, part-time. Because work and being around people and getting in your car and getting out in the world is so meaningful.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And I think it's important to get back to you. I'm waiting to get back to me. I'm one of the dads that kind of put their life aside to be present 100% of the time. And everybody says, well, when are you going to start playing music again? I have a 3.5-year-old, and I'm like, as soon as he's in school, like 2 more years. When he's going full time, kindergarten's till noon. But when he's going to 2:45, I'm playing music again.
Well, and I love that. But you have a plan, which is some people don't. So I love that advice of getting back to you. It's so damn important for sure. Well, Bob, honestly, I have like 50 more things I want to talk to you about. But I want to be mindful of your time too, and just thank you so much for
Thanks for
sharing.
having me. This is a fun conversation.
It was a fun conversation, but also I think just a super informative conversation that parents really need to hear, and also even just the women listening to the show about being stuck. I mean, all of it. There's so many good nuggets. So where though can parents find more about this DNA for addiction test?
Well, it's at DNAforaddiction.com, either .org, which is it? I don't know. It's on
We'll have it in the show
somewhere.
notes. Don't worry. We're having the show notes. Yeah.
And anytime you want to get a hold of me, if you have addiction problems, I have Oro House Recovery Centers. Call and ask for Bob. And then my phone number. There's a documentary movie about me, and if you watch it at the end, it gets my cell phone number, and I'll just give it out to you right now. 213-804-3843. My cell phone number is 213-804-3843. And you call me if you have a question about addiction. And if I can answer, I'll answer. I'm better at texting, right? But I want to be people say, like, how could you put your phone? Really, literally only a few thousand people have called over a 9-year period of time. It's not that bad. It's not that bad to be available to the world.
Wow.
I've done a lot of harm. I'm trying to break even. I got a lot of
you are in service, and I love it. No, I love it. Your karma, you've got good karma, Bob. I can feel it. Well, Bob, thank you so much for just being such a light and just sharing your experience. And I love just the openness and the realness and the rawness of this conversation. So I appreciate you. Thank you for being on the show.
Thank you so much. Have a great day.